A while ago I picked up an Atari ST on eBay. Growing up I always had an Amiga, but fancied having a look at what Atari STs are about. Been using it recently. This is a 512 ST-FM and hit a few issues recently where a lot of things seem to struggle with just the half a meg of memory that this thing has as standard. So having a look around at how to expand the memory, I found some options around about adding additional memory directly to the board, soldering it to the board as there's no sockets. There's a piggybacking method, I believe, but I also found on eBay this Marpet 4MB sort of external memory adapter. So this gives you an additional 4 meg of memory, and it says no soldering is required to install it. It piggybacks off a couple of chips, and in this model it basically replaces the memory on board. So you disable the half meg on board and you add this external 4 meg memory. So to start with, I said about dismantling the case. So I'm just taking all the screws out here, just trying to get access to the motherboard. So not done this before, not got any real experience of Atari STs, but I thought I'd put this video together and let you know some of the issues that I had, just in case anyone else has tried this and might find this useful. So I just took the Gotek drive out there. This Atari ST came with an internal floppy drive that had died, so I replaced it with a Gotek. This is the shielding for the power supply. It's got a built-in power supply, the Atari ST, as opposed to a massive brick like what I'm used to on the Amiga. Noticed the 400 volt cap was bulging quite a bit. Don't know if that's normal, but there's not that many caps on the power supply, so I've ordered a few spares, and at a later date I'll be recapping the power supply. There's two screws that hold the power supply to the motherboard, and it just lifts off. To get the motherboard out, pull it away from the back of the case. That's the power supply coming out, and that's the cap that's bulging. But I've seen a couple of videos of other people's and theirs seem to be bulging as well, so I don't know if that's normal, but due to the age of the machine, a recap's always a good idea. So this is the first piggybacked chip. This goes onto the MMU, so if you read the instructions, you need to orientate this the right way around. That's the important thing. So the instructions, the Marpet instructions, talk about how to find pin 1 on the chip and how to orientate this with the piggybacked socket. So you literally just have to press it down over the top of the socketed chip. There's a few different revisions of ST motherboard, and again the instructions go through how to locate your MMU. The second socketed chip is what I'm trying to tackle here. So just under that shielding there's another chip. Now this one you actually have to remove. It's a little bit of a pain to access due to the shielding, but take the chip out. Remember which way round it's orientated. So I'm just trying to use a screwdriver and a chip remover tool just to get it out, keeping the orientation the same way, just placing it out there. And then the second sort of piggyback system here. Now the instructions tell you to put the chip into the socket first and then fit it. I think it would be a lot easier to fit it and then add the chip. It was quite hard to see with the chip on for alignment. But that's me now plugging that piggybacked board with the chip on top back into the SD. So 2 piggyback boards, one onto the MMU and then one onto this chip. This is the video shifter chip, the one that they've just replaced here. What I'm doing here, what I decided to do, is just bend the metal shielding up a little bit where I'm going to close it and it just comes in contact with that ribbon cable, just to ensure that it doesn't have any issues with cutting the cable. Now again, in the instructions, depending on what machine you have, you'll have to have a look and how much memory you've got on your expansion board. Then you may or may not need to disable some internal memory. So I had a 4 meg expansion board, which I believe is the most that this Atari ST can address. So I had to disable all the internal memory, and using the table in the manual, it told me to cut 2 resistors going to the internal memory. So I've done that, and then it tells you to take a 5-volt feed from the capacitor, so from the positive side of the capacitor to the resistors. Now you saw me using croc clips, which is what I got with the kit. Those things were massive and I wasn't very comfortable using those, so I've took those off now and I'm soldering 2 wires from the 5-volt feed where it says, so from the positive side of the capacitor to the resistors that I've just cut. I've put some insulation tape below the resistors, just so that as things get pressed down over time, they're not going to make contact with the board. So that's me just soldering the 2 wires on now. Going back to the MMU chip, yeah, I did have issues trying to orientate it, but again, just read through the instructions, just work out where pin 1 is on the board, which is easy, and then where pin 1 is on your sort of piggybacked PCB. That was the hardest thing for me. It says there's a big number 1. I couldn't find that. In my case, there was one of the pins that had a larger trace that ended up to be pin 1. So that's it. That is it. It's 2 piggybacked boards and 2 wires. You can just see the memory expansion sitting outside the ST there on the left hand side on the desk. So this is my first power on test. I haven't put everything back together fully, so I've got my finger on the power button just in case I start seeing smoke. Everything looked good. I got the machine turning on. No idea if the memory worked, but at least it powered on. So what I did next is I managed to find a sysinfo file that I loaded onto the Gotek, and then when I ran that showed me that I've got 4 meg total memory. This is where I decided to put the memory expansion board in the end. So I removed the shielding that goes around the floppy drive just to give me a bit more space, and I seated it with some double-sided tape between the power supply shielding and where the floppy drive shielding should be. I attached the ground wire to the metal shielding, and that was it. Very happy. Yeah, not too bad an expansion. A lot easier than certainly soldering memory chips directly to the board. So yeah, great result. 4 meg memory expansion Atari ST.